They would talk about that night for months. Some whispered it behind closed doors. Some repeated it with disbelief. But everyone who witnessed it remembered one thing. The banquet was minutes from collapse, and the person who saved it was the last woman anyone expected. But to understand how it happened, and why a room full of rising young chefs nearly destroyed the most important event the Harrington Grand Hotel had hosted in a decade, you have to go back to the moment the first mistake was made. It didn't begin with a burnt sauce. It didn't begin with missing ingredients. It didn't even begin in the kitchen. It began when a 71-year-old grandmother stepped through the service hallway, following the faint sound of knives hitting cutting boards, simply trying to visit her granddaughter during a break. Her name was Margaret Hale. She didn't look like a threat. She didn't look like someone capable of commanding a kitchen. She didn't look like someone whose recipes once trained chefs now praised by critics. No, she looked like what they assumed she was, an old woman who didn't belong. The young cooks exchanged smirks when she entered. They had the arrogance of people who believed they'd already mastered the world, the kind who confuse speed with skill and volume with authority. One of them muttered, "Great, someone's grandma wandered in." Another said louder, "Just don't get in our way." They didn't know who she was. They didn't know the career she walked away from. They didn't know that her hands, soft, wrinkled, steady, had once plated dishes for governors, celebrities, and foreign dignitaries. And they definitely didn't know she was about to become the only thing standing between them and a banquet disaster so catastrophic it would reach the hotel's executive board. Because later that night, when the pressure reached a breaking point, when the main course collapsed, when the head chef froze in panic, and when hundreds of high-profile guests waited for a dinner that was falling apart behind the scenes, the young cooks would look around desperately for someone who knew what to do. And the only person who stepped forward was the same woman they mocked. What happened next would turn a normal evening into a story the hotel would never forget. A story about humiliation, ego, and a lesson delivered with the quiet precision of someone who had spent a lifetime perfecting the impossible. Before we dive into the chaos, and before you witness the moment everything shifts, tell us in the comments where you're watching from tonight. We love hearing from our community before the real story begins. Because trust me, when you see how this night ends, you'll understand why no one ever underestimated Margaret Hale again. The Harrington Grand Hotel was built to impress. Its tall glass doors, polished marble floors, and chandelier-lit lobby gave the illusion of flawless order, an illusion that began to crack the moment the kitchen staff clocked in that morning. The banquet was only hours away, a high-profile charity event that would bring in wealthy donors, political guests, and every executive the hotel cared about impressing. And yet, beneath the surface, the pressure inside the kitchen simmered dangerously, like a sauce left unattended on a burner that no one remembered turning on. To the hotel staff, the day felt tense in a way that was difficult to articulate. Cooks moved faster than usual. Voices echoed louder. The sous chef barked orders with a sharpness meant to hide his uncertainty. The younger chefs, fresh out of culinary school, high on ambition, low on humility, worked with frantic speed, believing speed alone would compensate for the mistakes they didn't yet realize they were making. And it was inside this environment, this barely contained pressure cooker, that Margaret Hale stepped quietly into the service hallway. She didn't look like someone meant to be there. She didn't wear a chef's coat. She didn't carry an order sheet or a clipboard. She didn't shout or rush or push past people. She simply walked. A warm but cautious expression. A folded apron draped over her arm, out of habit more than necessity. Her granddaughter, Lily, had started her first week in the kitchen. A small role, prep cook. Mostly chopping vegetables, washing produce, plating appetizers. Lily had asked Margaret to visit during her break, maybe share lunch together, maybe show her the hotel she admired so much. But Margaret hadn't arrived early by accident. She wanted to observe. Not just the kitchen, but the way Lily was treated. Because Margaret knew something Lily didn't. Kitchen culture can make or break a young cook. What she didn't expect, however, was how quickly the kitchen's atmosphere would reveal itself. The moment she turned the corner into the stainless steel maze of the culinary prep area, she saw it. Chaos hidden beneath forced confidence. Young cooks darted from station to station. Pans clattered. Spices spilled across counters. The head chef, Bennett Rhodes, was nowhere to be found. Instead, a tall sous chef with a clipped voice and jittering hands tried to control the room. Move, move, move. No, not like that. Faster, he snapped, frustration bleeding through every word. Margaret had seen that kind of panic before, the kind that grows in people who aren't ready for responsibility. The kind that makes them lash out, hoping no one notices the cracks forming in their leadership. But it wasn't the sous chef who noticed her first. It was the young cooks. A small group gathered near the vegetable prep station glanced her way. She smiled gently, ready to introduce herself, but their faces changed in an instant. Smirks, whispers, raised eyebrows. Who is that?" one muttered. "Somebody's grandma," another said with a laugh. "Probably here to drop off muffins." Margaret heard every word. Her hearing wasn't as sharp as it once was, but arrogance has a way of sharpening sound. She paused, taking a small breath, steadying herself, a gesture no one noticed except Lily, who rushed over with wide, embarrassed eyes. "Grandma, you're early," Lily whispered, cheeks flushed with a mixture of love and fear. Margaret squeezed her hand. "No trouble, darling. Just taking a look around." But the kitchen wasn't done revealing itself. "Hey!" A voice cut through the chaos. A young cook named Brandon, known in the kitchen for his loud confidence and minimal experience. He pushed past two others and pointed at Margaret with a dismissive wave. "This area is staff only." "You lost?" he asked. Margaret glanced at Lily, not wanting to embarrass her. But the question lingered in the air with disrespect so blunt it didn't need clarification. "I'm with my granddaughter," she said with calm politeness. "Just visiting." Brandon rolled his eyes, clearly unimpressed. "Right, well, you were kind of busy. Maybe wait in the lobby? We don't have time to babysit." A few cooks snickered. One murmured under his breath, "Old people always wander in." Another added, "She's gonna slow everything down." Lily took a sharp breath, hurt stinging behind her eyes. "Grandma, I'm sorry." Margaret stopped her with a gentle hand. "It's all right," she whispered softly. But it wasn't all right. Not in the way the young cooks thought. Not in the way they assumed. Because in that moment, as Margaret stood in the middle of the chaotic kitchen, surrounded by clattering pans and careless arrogance, something else happened that made her posture shift. It was a shift only chefs recognize. A straightening of the spine. A softening of the shoulders. A stillness in her breath. A settling in, like someone stepping back into a familiar battlefield. But the young cooks didn't see it. They saw only what they wanted to see, a harmless older woman, fragile and out of place. They had no idea they were mocking a woman who had commanded kitchens larger than this one, trained chefs far more talented than any of them, and served guests with standards far higher than the banquet they were preparing for tonight. They didn't know she once held Michelin-level accolades. They didn't know hotel directors once begged her to come out of retirement. They didn't know her hands could identify mistakes by touch alone. They didn't know she had survived decades of pressure they couldn't begin to imagine. They had no idea that the biggest disaster of their careers was only hours away. And the only person capable of preventing it was the grandmother they were mocking. The sous chef shouted again, panic rising. "Where's Chef Bennett? Someone find him." No one had an answer. Margaret's eyes softened. She didn't know it yet, but this missing chef, and the chaos building by the second, would soon force her into a decision she thought she'd left behind forever. A decision that would change the lives of every person in that kitchen. A decision that would define the night. And as she watched the young cook scramble, slicing inconsistently, burning onions, mixing sauces without tasting, Margaret quietly realized something. The banquet was already in danger. But no one else knew it. Not until the moment everything fell apart, a moment closer than any of them realized. The Harrington Grand's kitchen wasn't designed for chaos. It was designed for precision, clean stainless steel counters, polished storage racks, and a layout that allowed dishes to flow like choreography from station to station. But as the morning thickened and the pressure of the banquet crept closer, the room felt like a tightly lidded pot starting to rattle, steam hissing at the seams. Margaret Hale stood quietly beside her granddaughter's station, her hands gently folded, observing the way the young cooks attacked their tasks with enthusiasm but not discipline. Their movements were sharp but messy, fast but careless. Techniques she had mastered decades ago were being butchered in front of her, and though she remained polite on the surface, an old instinct stirred inside her chest, an instinct she thought she had buried when she left professional kitchens behind. Lily, meanwhile, chopped vegetables with the kind of nervous concentration only a new cook could have, shoulders hunched, breathing shallow, trying desperately to keep up with the frantic pace while pretending her co-workers' earlier comments hadn't humiliated her. "Grandma," she whispered without lifting her eyes, "I'm sorry they talked to you like that." Margaret shook her head gently. "You don't apologize for someone else's poor manners." "But they shouldn't have." "No," Margaret agreed softly, "they shouldn't have. But this is not the first kitchen where young cooks thought age equals irrelevance." Lily bit her lip. "Does it bother you?" Margaret didn't answer immediately. She watched another cook sear chicken breasts at a temperature too high, burning the edges while leaving the center raw. She watched a sauce simmer unattended, bubbles rising too aggressively, a sign it would scorch soon. She watched knives glide across cutting boards without precision, wasting product, ruining consistency. Then she exhaled. "It bothers me," Margaret said finally, "because they don't know what they don't know. And in a kitchen, ignorance is expensive." Before Lily could respond, the kitchen doors slammed open. Chef Bennett Rhodes finally arrived. Or rather, stumbled in. He looked exhausted, almost disoriented. His chef's jacket was wrinkled, one of the buttons mismatched, and his hair suggested he had either overslept or hadn't slept at all. His eyes squinted against the bright kitchen lights, adjusting slowly like someone dragging themselves back from a long night they regretted. The sous chef rushed to him immediately. "Chef, we've been waiting. We need your direction." Bennett waved him off with a tired hand. "Just give me a minute." The kitchen froze. A minute was a luxury they didn't have. Margaret watched the scene unfold with a sinking feeling in her stomach. She recognized this look. She had seen it in chefs who were drowning, chefs who lost control long before the first plate left the kitchen. Chefs whose pride stood between them and the help they desperately needed. And Bennett Rhodes, head chef of the Harrington Grand Hotel, was not ready for tonight. The truth settled over Margaret like a slow, heavy weight. This banquet was going to collapse. Not because of the ingredients, not because of the menu, but because the leadership was already crumbling. The sous chef tried again, desperate. "Chef, the staff needs instructions. The prep lists aren't finished. The protein delivery hasn't been checked. And the sauce base is—" "I said give me a minute," Bennett snapped, harsher this time. The kitchen fell silent. Tension collected like smoke. Margaret's fingers twitched near her apron. Not yet. She couldn't step in yet. It wasn't her place. She wasn't here to work. She wasn't here to interfere. She was here for Lily, nothing more. But the kitchen didn't care about her intentions. It spiraled regardless. Brandon, the loud young cook who had mocked her earlier, lifted a pot of boiling stock and sloshed half of it onto the floor, cursing loudly while the sous chef darted around grabbing towels. Another cook desperately whisked a broken hollandaise, trying to fix it with ingredients that would only make it worse. Someone dropped a tray of sliced zucchini. Someone else forgot to label raw fish. Margaret closed her eyes. It was happening already, the small unraveling that led to catastrophe. "Grandma?" Lily murmured. "Are you okay?" Margaret opened her eyes slowly, offering a smile that didn't reach them. "I'm fine," she said. "Just watching." A truth Lily didn't understand yet. Because in kitchens like this, disasters didn't strike suddenly. They built themselves quietly, layer by layer, mistake by mistake, until the final moment when pressure broke through like a cracked dam. Chef Bennett finally moved to the center of the room. "Listen up," he called out. Everyone stiffened. "We're behind schedule. I want the main proteins seasoned, the vegetables prepped, and the sauces stabilized within the next hour." A murmur of confusion rippled through the kitchen. That wasn't how the timing worked. Not for tonight's menu. Margaret frowned. The proteins needed marinating. The vegetables needed uniform cuts. The sauces needed slow reduction, not rushed heating. Bennett didn't notice. He simply turned away, rubbing his temples. Brandon whispered loudly, finally, "The man speaks." Another added, "Too late though. We're flying blind." The sous chef snapped, "Just do what he said." The moment Margaret tied the apron around her waist, the kitchen shifted, not dramatically, not immediately, but subtly, like the quiet moment before a storm begins its descent. For a few seconds, she stood completely still, letting the room continue its frantic unraveling. She watched the young apprentice poke hopelessly at the overcrowded pan of ruined duck breasts. She watched the sous chef pace in tight, panicked circles. She watched Chef Bennett slump against the counter, breathing too heavily for someone whose night was just beginning. The problem wasn't that the kitchen lacked skill. It was that it lacked direction. And direction, in a high-pressure kitchen, is the difference between excellence and a catastrophe written in real time. Lily approached, cheeks flushed, a spare apron in hand. "Grandma, are you sure?" she whispered, her voice trembling with a mixture of anxiety and awe. Margaret took the apron gently, tied it tighter around her waist, and gave her granddaughter a small, reassuring smile. "Tonight needs a steady hand," she said softly. "And that hand has to come from somewhere." Lily didn't fully understand, not yet. But she nodded with a seriousness that made Margaret's heart ache. Lily had inherited her kindness. She now needed to inherit her courage. Meanwhile, the kitchen continued to crack open. "Where's the garnish tray?" "I thought you prepped it." "No, that was your job. The executive director will be here in 2 hours. Sauce pot is burning. Move." Voices layered over each other, overlapping in panic. Metal clashed, water splashed, and the noise rose to a point where Margaret could almost feel the vibrations through the floor. Then came the breaking point. Brandon slammed a tray of half-prepped vegetables onto the counter and snapped loud enough for the entire room to hear, "This is ridiculous. How are we supposed to work like this if no one knows what they're doing?" The words hung in the air, careless and painfully ironic. Margaret turned toward him, not with anger, but with something far more disarming, understanding. She had seen dozens of Brandons in her lifetime, cocky, inexperienced, convinced that volume equals competence, unaware of how fragile their confidence truly was. The sous chef stormed toward Brandon. "Keep your voice down. You're making things worse." Brandon shot back, "It's already worse." And that was when the fire alarm chirped. Not the full alarm, just a warning beep from one of the overhead sensors. A small sound, barely noticeable, but Margaret heard it. Margaret understood it. Margaret knew exactly what it meant. A pan too hot, oil too close to ignition, a kitchen seconds from a flare-up. She turned immediately toward the source, a skillet left on high heat under a line of sizzling fat, unattended because the cook who placed it there had run across the room to grab ingredients he forgot to prep. Margaret moved. Not panicked. Just with the controlled urgency of someone who had dodged real kitchen fires before. She grabbed the pan handle with a towel, slid it off the burner, and lowered the heat in one effortless motion. The sous chef whipped around. "Hey, don't." But he stopped mid-sentence. Because the flare-up he thought he was reacting to never happened. Margaret prevented it. Calmly, without fanfare. The room froze for a fraction of a second. It was the first moment all morning that the chaos softened. Then Brandon scoffed loudly. "What? She's gonna teach us how to cook now." A few cooks laughed. But Lily didn't. The sous chef didn't. Even Chef Bennett, still slumped near the counter, lifted his head weakly. And Margaret just wiped the edge of the pan clean and returned it to the stove. She didn't bother defending herself. She didn't even look offended. Her calmness made Brandon's arrogance look like a child throwing a tantrum. That alone rattled him. The sous chef cleared his throat. "Everyone, back to work. We're losing time." But they weren't just losing time. They were losing control. The truth had become impossible to ignore. The young chefs didn't know how to handle a banquet of this scale. Not yet, not without help, not without someone guiding them. And then, as if the night wanted to prove the point, the double doors of the kitchen burst open again. In walked the event coordinator, a clipboard clutched in her trembling hands. "Chef Bennett," she said breathlessly, "the banquet hall is filling faster than expected. VIP guests are arriving early. We need the first course in 90 minutes. 90 minutes? A death sentence." Chef Bennett looked like someone had drained the blood from his face. 90? That's impossible. We're not even. It has to happen, the coordinator repeated. The general manager is furious. You need to be ready. She left as quickly as she arrived. Hollow silence. Even Brandon stopped talking. Lily's hands trembled slightly at the cutting board. The sous chef's breath quickened. Someone dropped a ladle. Someone else turned off the burner out of sheer overwhelm. Margaret looked at the clock. Her mind moved with precise calculation. Timing, prep, temperature, sequence. She could see the entire banquet unfolding in her head like a blueprint. But Bennett was crumbling. He stared at his reflection in the metal counter, eyes unfocused, breathing shallow. "Chef?" the sous chef asked. "What's the plan?" Bennett didn't answer. "Chef?" Nothing. Margaret closed her eyes for a brief moment. This was it. The line she never meant to cross. The role she had walked away from. The responsibility she'd promised she'd never take on again. She could remain silent. She could walk away. Let the kitchen collapse under its own arrogance. But then she looked at Lily, her granddaughter, her pride, her hope. Lily's eyes were wide, frightened, silently pleading for someone to take control. Margaret took a slow, steady breath. Then her voice, calm, clear, undeniable, cut through the tension like a clean blade. Everyone listened carefully. Heads turned. Brandon scoffed under his breath but didn't interrupt. The sous chef straightened, instinctively recognizing authority even before he understood it. Chef Bennett blinked, confused, as if hearing a voice from a distant memory. Margaret stepped forward into the center of the kitchen. A place she hadn't stood in years. A place she had once commanded. "The menu isn't the problem," she began. "The timing is. You're trying to cook everything at once, and you're burning half of it while undercooking the rest." No one objected, because she was right. "The first thing we're going to do is restructure the stations. Each of you needs to do less, but do it correctly. And we'll start now." Brandon crossed his arms. "Why should we listen to you?" The sous chef elbowed him. Brandon quiet. Margaret didn't flinch. She simply lifted her chin. "Because," she said softly, "if you don't, this banquet will fail. And when it does, every one of your names will be on the report." Pure, heavy silence. The kind that follows truth spoken without apology. Margaret walked to the ruined pan of duck, examined a piece, and placed it down gently. "This is unusable," she said. "Start over. But sear in small batches, no more than 4 at a time. And do not crowd the pan." Her tone had shifted, polite still, but carrying the quiet, commanding weight of someone who has done this long enough to recognize every mistake before it happens. The sous chef stepped forward. "Yes, ma'am." Brandon stared, confused. "You're taking orders from her?" The sous chef's voice sharpened. "I'm taking orders from someone who actually knows what she's doing." Margaret didn't smile. She simply turned to Lily. "Bring me the ingredient list," she said. Lily nodded, hope flickering in her eyes. And for the first time that morning, Margaret allowed herself one thought. These children have no idea what they've just unleashed. For the first time that day, the Harrington Grand Hotel kitchen fell silent. Not because the chaos had stopped, but because something far stronger had taken hold. Leadership. Real leadership. The kind that doesn't shout, doesn't boast, doesn't demand respect, but earns it through calm certainty and experience forged in years of fire. Margaret Hale stood in the center of the kitchen as if she had never left it. Not a guest. Not a bystander. Not somebody's grandma. But a chef, one whose presence itself felt like a recipe settling into perfect sync. She spread the ingredient list across the counter. "Everyone, gather around. We have 90 minutes, and we are not going to waste a single one." No one resisted. Not even Brandon. The young cooks grouped together, their earlier arrogance cooling into something closer to humility, or maybe fear. But they listened. Margaret ran her finger down the list. Start by salvaging what we can. Lily, you take the sauces. You've got a good palate, trust it. Evan, redo the vegetables. Your cuts are cleaner than the others. Brandon, he tensed, bracing for humiliation. You're on protein. But you follow my timing. Exactly. Brandon blinked, surprised. Me? On the main course. Show me you can do what you say you can do, Margaret replied. A challenge. An olive branch. A lesson in one sentence. The sous chef leaned in. What do you need me to do? Margaret met his eyes. Organize and stabilize. Keep the line running. And make sure no 1 inch, she glanced at the nearly ignited pan from earlier, leaves a burner unattended again. He nodded, ashamed but grateful. She turned to the trembling apprentice who had ruined the first batch of duck. Don't worry, she told him, gentle but firm. Mistakes happen. What matters is that we don't repeat them. Watch me. She taught him in seconds what culinary school had failed to teach him in months. How to heat the pan properly. How to listen to the sizzle. How to feel the resistance of the meat. How not to fear the flame. Her hands moved with the grace of someone who had lived half her life under kitchen heat. Young eyes followed every motion, wide with awe. For the first time that morning, the kitchen breathed. Then everything accelerated. Margaret guided them through each second as if she could see the entire night unfolding in real time. She moved from station to station, adjusting temperatures, correcting grips, saving sauces seconds before burning, tasting, seasoning, tasting again. She taught while she worked, tiny lessons wrapped in quick instructions, reminders of things that matter more than ego. Your knife is your voice, don't rush your words. Heat is a language. Listen to it. Cooking isn't speed, it's timing. Respect everyone in the kitchen, or the kitchen will teach you humility. The young cooks absorbed every word like scripture. The sous chef, once frazzled, now mirrored her calm focus. Chef Bennett, though still shaky, found his footing watching her, embarrassed, yes, but recognizing a standard he'd long forgotten. The chaos didn't disappear, but it transformed into rhythm. Pans moved in harmony. Sauces thickened at the right pace. Proteins seared perfectly, Brandon hitting the timing almost to the second. Vegetables roasted evenly. Plates began lining the pass with consistency and confidence. The first 20 dishes rolled out looking like they belonged in a magazine spread. And the room erupted in relief. The event coordinator burst in moments later, breathless. They're sending servers for the first course. Are we ready? Margaret stepped aside. Take them, she said. Trays lifted. Servers rushed out. And the kitchen, this kitchen that had nearly collapsed hours earlier, shifted into something that felt almost magical. But the night wasn't over. They plated dish after dish. Served course after course. Fixed mistakes before they became disasters. Adapted when the clock pushed harder. And when the final entree left the pass, when the dessert plates were arranged in perfect rows, when the ballroom erupted into applause loud enough to shake the walls, the entire kitchen froze. It was over. They had done it. A banquet that had been hours from humiliation, saved by a 71-year-old retired chef they had mocked. The sous chef approached her first. His voice broke as he said, "Thank you. I don't know how to even." "You learned," Margaret interrupted softly. "That's enough." One by one, the young cooks approached her, not out of obligation, but out of a humility born from witnessing true mastery. Even Brandon hung back, eyes low, cheeks flushed. Finally, he stepped forward. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "For earlier. I didn't know." Margaret rested a hand on his shoulder. "You will meet many chefs in your career," she said. "Some loud, some brilliant, some cruel. But the ones worth remembering? They're the ones who teach you something." Brandon swallowed, nodding. Chef Bennett moved toward her last. Shame covered him like a heavy coat. "I should have led them," he said. "You still can," Margaret replied. "One night doesn't define you. But what you do after this will." Something changed in his eyes. Resolve. Gratitude. Understanding. Then came the moment no one expected. The general manager himself entered the kitchen, beaming. "Brilliant," he exclaimed. "Absolutely brilliant. Chef Bennett, your team executed flawlessly." Bennett opened his mouth, then closed it. His throat tightened. He looked at the cooks, at the sous chef, at Lily, at Margaret, and then, in a single act of rare humility, he said, "Sir, this was not my victory." He stepped aside. "This is the chef who saved tonight." All eyes turned to Margaret. The kitchen burst into applause. Not polite applause. Not obligatory applause. But the kind that rises from genuine awe and respect. Margaret's eyes softened, almost watery. She hadn't felt this feeling, this purpose, in years. But then, the gut punch. As the applause faded, the general manager leaned closer. "You know," he said with a warm smile, "we have an opening for a culinary mentor. Training young chefs, teaching fundamentals. Flexible hours. You'd be perfect." The room fell silent. Lily's eyes widened. The young cook stared. The sous chef mouthed, "Say yes." But Margaret's expression shifted, soft, nostalgic, bittersweet. She smiled, but it wasn't a yes. "I appreciate it," she said gently. "Truly. But tonight wasn't about coming back." They waited. She touched Lily's cheek gently. "It was about making sure she knows she comes from a line of women who never walk away from a fight." Lily's eyes filled with tears. Margaret untied her apron, folded it neatly, and placed it on the counter like a closing chapter. Then she walked out, quietly, gracefully, leaving an entire kitchen watching in reverence. And here's the twist. Weeks later, one of the young cooks would discover a plaque, from decades ago, hidden behind an outdated shelf in the hotel lobby's storage room. Margaret Hale, Executive Chef, Harrington Grand Hotel 1983 to 1996, creator of the signature banquet menu. A legend. Not just somebody's grandma. Not just a visitor. But the very chef whose foundation the hotel still stood on. They had mocked the woman who built the kitchen they worked in. Experience is a quiet teacher. Respect is a choice. And sometimes the greatest lessons come from the voices we nearly ignore. So let me ask you, would you have recognized Margaret's greatness that night? Or fallen into the same trap the young cooks did? Was justice truly served? Tell us in the comments. And if this story moved you, wait until you hear what happened in next week's tale. A story even more unbelievable than this one. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe so you never miss the next life-changing twist.